In the mid-90s, music was loud. You had the roaring guitars of grunge and alternative rock, and the swaggering anthems of Britpop. But then a completely different sound started to bleed out from the post-industrial corners of Bristol, England. It didn't shout for attention, it whispered, it haunted, it lingered. This was moody, atmospheric music that sounded like a forgotten film noir soundtrack from a world that never quite existed. The band behind it didn't chase fame. In fact, they pretty much ran from it. They had no interest in being pop stars, they rarely did interviews, and they refused to play the game. And yet their debut album became one of the most defining and unlikely global sensations of the entire decade. This was the sound of Portishead. So how did this melancholy masterpiece, an album called Dummy, manage to capture the soul of a generation? How did its shadowy, smoke-filled rooms and heartbreaking confessions become the backdrop to millions of lives? It's a story of happy accidents, obsessive perfectionism, and a creative process so weird it was basically wizardry. Before we get started with today's video, if you guys want to support my channel, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And I've been told from a lot of my subscribers that they find themselves unsubscribed from my channel, or they don't see my new videos pop up. So make sure you turn on all notifications. And if you guys missed the announcement, I've started a second channel which covers shorter stories like I used to do in the early days of my channel. The link to that channel is in the description box below. The story of Portishead is the story of a sound that on paper just shouldn't have worked. It was built on broken vinyl, tortured tape, and vocals that felt almost too raw to be put on a record. At the time, the mainstream was bolsterous and confident. Oasis and Blur were battling for the charts with chest-thumping bravado. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Nirvana's angst had carved out a new frontier for rock, and at the same time, they were about to be replaced by pop-punk groups like The Offspring and Green Day. And then, from the quiet, unassuming city of Bristol, came Dummy. This was an album that found its power in restraint, its beauty in sadness, and its genius in imperfection. It was music for the come-down, for the quiet moments of introspection, for the space between the noise, and somehow, against all odds, it connected with millions. It won the prestigious Mercury Music Prize in 1995 over albums like Oasis's Definitely Maybe, and it went on to sell millions of copies worldwide. It was a phenomenon that even the band itself seemed to find bewildering. While London had Britpop and Seattle had grunge, Bristol was its own unique ecosystem. It was a city with deep roots in Caribbean sound system culture, a thriving DJ scene, and a post-punk sensibility. Out of this melting pot, a new genre was slowly taking shape, one that journalists, much to the annoyance of the bands, would later label trip-hop. It was a fusion of slow, hypnotic hip-hop breakbeats, deep bass lines, and a cinematic, often somber mood. Acts like Massive Attack, who were already making waves with their album Blue Lines, were the pioneers of this Bristol sound. It was in this world that a young, self-described hip-hop obsessive named Geoff Barrow was honing his craft. Originally wanting to be a graphic artist, he soon realized it wasn't his calling, so he gave music a try. It was at the age of 18, while living in Bristol, he called a local producer asking for a job. The producer agreed to give him some work, provided that the aspiring musician would help him build a new studio, which he did. That studio was called Coach House, and Barrow was soon working there as a tape operator, and he got the chance to work with Massive Attack on their groundbreaking debut. He even had a co-writing credit on Nina Cherry's song Some Days on her Homebrew album. Growing up, Barrow's musical influences included the 1960s and 1970s era movie soundtracks from Italian, French, and American spy films and thrillers. He compared these soundtracks to bottles of wine, claiming that he had no use or interest in anything later than 1976. Funny enough, though, Barrow admitted in a lot of cases he never actually watched the movies themselves. As he got older, he became a student of American hip-hop producers, totally fascinated by their ability to stitch together a variety of sounds, maybe a James Brown drum break, a classical string section, a jazz horn riff, and they would fuse this into something brand new. He wasn't just a producer, he was a sonic architect dreaming up sounds he couldn't find anywhere else. Having already played in several local bands, Barrow was eager to create music of his own shaped by this new style. Making use of downtime in the studio, he began developing tracks that would ultimately form Dummy. But a beatmaker is only one part of the equation. The other crucial element arrived through the most un-rock and roll of circumstances that you can possibly imagine, a government-run employment scheme. It was in 1991 Barrow attended a compulsory course to help unemployed people start small businesses called Enterprise Allowance. The government gave attendees a £40 cash bonus for people to learn new skills and start their own businesses. It was here that Barrow met Beth Gibbons. While others in the room were aspiring hairdressers, mechanics, or even chocolatiers, Gibbons was a quiet, introspective singer and songwriter from the English countryside, just wanting to sing. After chatting during a coffee break, the pair realized they had something in common. While Barrow had already a few brushes with fame, Gibbons' closest brush up until this point was when she sang with bassist Paul Webb of the group Talk Talk. Gibbons was 7 years older than Barrow, who remarked, "She was grown up in my eyes." Gibbons had been performing in pubs up until this point, her voice a singular instrument forged from a love of Nina Simone and Janis Joplin. Barrow heard something in her voice that was both timeless and completely unique, a frighteningly grown-up quality that held a universe of emotion. He played her his hip-hop inspired beats, and she played him her deeply personal songs. The contrast was stark, but somewhere in that unlikely fusion, the nucleus of Portishead was formed. I do want to point out that if you read a lot of the interviews from 1994 and 1995, both Gibbons and Barrow initially admitted they weren't really impressed with each other's music. Barrow confessed that it was only when Gibbons wrote the song Sour Times that their musical opinions of one another turned around. Nobody loves great, true. Calling themselves Portishead, they took their name from the dreary coastal town where Barrow grew up, a name that perfectly captured the beautiful desolation their music would evoke. He added, "I don't really like the place. It's a place where you can go and die." Gibbons added, "And that's why we named ourselves after it." Another early song the pair wrote together was It Could Be Sweet. Like a long forgotten dream. While they were working on the song at Coach House Studios, a local jazz guitarist named Adrian Utley happened to be recording for another project in a neighboring room. He overheard the song. Utley was 8 years senior to Gibbons. The guitarist recalled the moment he first encountered the pair's music, saying he was struck by the combination of deep bass and Beth Gibbons' vocals. To him, it felt like hearing something entirely new, fresh, and full of energy. Utley proved to be the final piece of the puzzle. A seasoned jazz guitarist about 15 years older than Barrow, and Utley had a deep knowledge of music theory and a love of evocative sounds from 60s film soundtracks, especially composers like John Barry. He brought not just his sublime tremolo-soaked guitar playing, but also his collection of movie soundtracks, some of which Barrow had never heard before. When the hip-hop head, the folk-hearted poet, and the veteran jazz experimentalist got together, the real work began. Keen to expand his skills, Utley asked Barrow to show him the ins and outs of sampling and studio production. In exchange, Utley contributed his own playing, adding guitar, bass, organ, and the result was a striking fusion. Samples drawn from classic jazz and soul artists like Isaac Hayes, layered alongside Utley's instrumentation and Beth Gibbons' unmistakable vocals that were rooted in both folk and rock traditions. Soon after, Portishead's demos caught the attention of Polygram distributed Go Discs label, which eventually signed the group. The creation of their first record, Dummy, wasn't so much a recording session as it was an experiment in sonic archaeology. It was built on the philosophy that flew in the face of polished, pristine production of the era. Portishead's big idea was the art of intentional degradation. They didn't just want to make a new sound, they wanted to make their new sounds feel old, haunted, and loaded with history they never actually had. Barrow later admitted Dummy wasn't a chill-out album. Portishead had more in common with Nirvana. He felt the album was raw and aggressive at its core, but it got misinterpreted as dinner party music. Their studio became a playground for unorthodox techniques. Barrow, armed with a sampler and an Atari computer, started building the album's skeleton. But instead of just sampling old records, which was getting expensive and legally risky, they decided to create their own samples from scratch. This became their most revolutionary move. They would record live instruments, then press those recordings onto vinyl records, but they didn't stop there. Barrow would take these freshly pressed records and abuse them. He'd scuff them up, kick them around the studio, and basically treat them like skateboards. This process added an authentic layer of crackle, hiss, and wear. He would then sample these self-destroyed records, capturing not just the music, but the ghost of a life it never lived. This is what gave Dummy its signature dusty vinyl-age sound, a texture that makes it feel like a crate digger's lost treasure. Now, Dummy does include some notable directly sampled material as well, especially on the song Glory Box, which is built around a major sample from Isaac Hayes' Ike's Rap 2. while Biscuit uses a pitch-down piece from Johnny Ray's I'll Never Fall in Love Again. To get a lo-fi, distant quality on Beth Gibbons' vocals, they sent her takes through an FM transmitter and recorded them back from a tinny radio. Adrian Utley's guitar work was the perfect melodic counterpoint, his shimmering, questioning lines defining tracks like Roads and Glory Box. His love for spy movie soundtracks is all over the album, lending the music a cool cinematic tension. And then there was Beth. Her voice delivered with almost a painful intimacy. It was the soul of the machine. She sang about loneliness and heartbreak with a conviction that was just devastating. Her lyrics were poetic and raw. Lines like "Nobody loves me, it's true, not like you do," from Sour Times, cut straight to the bone. During a 1995 French talk show, when she was asked if she'd ever sung on albums before, Gibbons nervously admitted she had mostly just sung in her bedroom. That bedroom intimacy, the sense of a private world being made public, is exactly what makes her performance so magnetic. She wasn't performing for an audience, she was confessing. Interviewers and critics frequently made note of Gibbons' dazed depression and noir nightmares. Barrow admitted that he had no clue where all these emotions and feelings came from, and was quoted as saying he doesn't really care, adding to the Sun-Herald, "I care if it's mentally damaging to her, but on the other hand, I'm not a great lyrical person." The band was also notable for being quite press shy. The Independent wrote in 1994 on their piece about the band, "Until now, the band's press encounters have followed a strict pattern. Reporter arrives, singer leaves often with a squeal of tires from her Triumph convertible." When Dummy was released on August 22, 1994, nobody, least of all the band, was prepared for what happened next. The album landed in a musical landscape that was the polar opposite of its sound. Britpop was at its zenith, a celebration of the British identity wrapped in a catchy guitar-driven anthem. Portishead were the antithesis to this. They were introverted, mysterious, and their music was steeped in a deep, universal melancholy. Barrow and Gibbons were concerned and shocked by their success, with Barrow telling the Sun-Herald, "We didn't expect to sell more than 30,000 copies in England. I wanted to release 3 albums before we crossed the channel, and it's all gone wrong, and I think it will finish us, to be honest." Their debut single, Numb, released ahead of the album, but it didn't even make a mark on the charts. But the record slowly found its audience. It got rave reviews, with critics hailing its innovative sound and emotional depth. The second single, Sour Times, and the hauntingly beautiful Glory Box started getting airplay. Glory Box, with its unforgettable Isaac Hayes sample, became an instant classic, its sultry, defiant tone resonating deeply. Their music started popping up everywhere, from film soundtracks to fashion shows. Its atmospheric quality was incredibly versatile. Sour Times peaked at number 13 in the UK and number 53 in the US on the Hot 100 chart, and number 6 on the Alternative Airplay chart. Glory Box, meanwhile, also peaked at number 13 in the UK, but didn't chart in the States. But the band fought their label on releasing the single. They were hesitant to release Glory Box, believing that it sounded more mainstream than the rest of their material. The band argued with their label, feeling the track fit better as part of the album rather than standing alone as a commercial release. However, the label insisted, and after some disagreement, the single went forward, ultimately providing the band with a significant financial reward. Barrow admitted, "We lost the argument really, but we bought houses." The ultimate validation came in 1995 when Dummy won the coveted Mercury Music Prize, beating Oasis's Definitely Maybe and PJ Harvey's To Bring You My Love. The win catapulted the band from a niche act into the mainstream spotlight. The album ended up going triple platinum in the UK, it went almost platinum in the States, and sold millions worldwide. Suddenly, the trio from Bristol, who had painstakingly crafted their dark, intimate world, were global superstars. New Musical Express gave Dummy a rare knockout review. Meanwhile, a DJ at Los Angeles station KCRW called it the album of the year. Dance magazine Mixmag and Melody Maker both named Dummy album of the year as well. Lavish praise was also heaped on the group from U2's Bono, Elton John, and Sting. But the group hated all of it. The reluctant stars narrative is central to Portishead's history. They were intensely private people with zero interest in the celebrity circus. They famously gave very few interviews, and when they did, they were often awkward and visibly uncomfortable. Beth Gibbons in particular shied away from the limelight, and her enigmatic presence only added to the band's mystique. Geoff Barrow has spoken about his frustration with the album being co-opted as dinner party music, feeling its raw, dark intent was misunderstood. Stating, "I would want to go in with a baseball bat and smash the expletive out of their fondue set," he once said about the cliche. Gibbons told the Toronto Star, "So if you listen to the album, that's probably a better interpretation of me than talking to me right now. That's why it's pointless sometimes me talking." A lot of talk was made about how Gibbons sounded fragile, while they're adding, "I think everyone is fragile, but people aren't going to necessarily show it. And that's what the album is about. Really not being able to show because you're going to get hurt." This wasn't just an act, it was a genuine reflection of their artistic ethos. They had made music that was deeply personal, and its transformation into a commercial product was something they struggled with. They refused to play the industry game, turning down lucrative offers and taking long hiatuses between albums. They were the ultimate anti-rock stars, a stance that ironically only made them cooler and more revered. By the time Portishead had success, both Paul Weller and Primal Scream requested Barrow's services. The band also put out a soundtrack to a 10-minute political assassination short film called To Kill a Dead Man. The band even appears in the short film, and some of the footage was later used in the Sour Times music video. But much to the chagrin of the group, the film gave some newcomers to the band a false image of the group, with Barrow telling the LA Times, "For some reason, the press people in England gave out some pictures of us from the film. So it's kind of like, hey, it's Portishead, and they're carrying guns and wearing dark shades," and it's like, no, that's not why we did it. 30 years after its release, Dummy seems to exist outside of time. Its sound, once so revolutionary, has become part of the fabric of modern music. You can hear its DNA in the work of countless artists who followed in their footsteps. Its influence even extends into hip-hop, with Kendrick Lamar collaborating with Beth Gibbons. Even Radiohead was influenced, eventually bringing Portishead's touring drummer, Clive Dreamer, on the road for their own shows. The band itself remains enigmatic as ever. They've released only 2 more studio albums since Dummy, each one a meticulously crafted work that defies expectations. They surface for rare performances, often for different causes, like a recently announced pre-recorded performance for a Palestinian benefit concert in September of this year. Beth Gibbons released her long-awaited solo debut, Lives Outgrown, in 2024 to critical acclaim, a work that continues to explore aging and a loss with her trademark vulnerability. The 30th anniversary of Dummy happened in 2024, and it was met with typical mixed feelings from the band, with Barrow expressing his disinterest and looking backward while still acknowledging the album's impact. So why did this dark, melancholic album become such a global sensation? Well, the answer lies in its profound honesty. In a world of noise and posturing, Dummy offered a space for quiet reflection. It wasn't about escapism, it was about immersion. It gave a voice to feelings of loneliness and heartbreak that are universally understood, but rarely expressed with such raw beauty. Portishead embraced the crackle, the hiss, and the static, and in doing so, they found a signal in the noise that continues to resonate today. Portishead taught us that there is beauty in the broken, and that sometimes the quietest voice can be the most powerful. Their refusal to compromise created a legacy that is as much about integrity as it was about innovation. What does Dummy mean to you? Share your memories about the album in the comments section below, and that brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.